how to handle anger, how to handle bullying, some things like that, is a real good question. And we have that problem all over the world, where in the dualistic societies, we have that problem. We don't know how to deal with emotions, and what results is we get caught in it like a trap, and most of the time we're not even aware. But first I want to explain something, a little bit of history on the reservation, just for a few minutes, because it explains a process that happened. And this is what really, it happened all over the world. But it happened most recently among Indian people. So it's really interesting to study, and that we learn from it. What I'm going to say is not meant to get you angry at anything or anybody, but it's to learn. Okay? What I'm going to say in the next few minutes is not to rile you up to hate the bad guy of the story. Okay? It's to learn. That's the most important thing. Because if we can't learn, then we're not really living. And if we can't learn, then we'll never know what love is. So we must learn. Okay? So in that spirit, I'm going to say this information. So try to keep it in that way too, in your mind and your heart. Back in the late 1800s, when we were placed on reservations, there were prison camps in the beginning. And this is a situation where we couldn't leave. We were not allowed to hunt. Our knives and guns were taken from us. And we were only allowed to eat whatever the American government gave to us, which was really no good food. The quality of the food was okay when it left places like Chicago and stuff like that. But once it got to some of these train stations between there and the reservation, a lot of these handlers would sell it. And then they would buy old food and put that in there instead, and these middlemen would make a lot of money. So what we got on a reservation was bullshit food. It was really no good. And we ended up getting all kinds of diseases like heart diseases, hypertension, diabetes, things like that. And then at the same time, our language and ceremonies were declared illegal by the United States. So we were hit physically, spiritually, and emotionally. Soon after that, our minds became weak. These are the four parts of the self. So with the four parts of the self being sick, we lost our connection to our sacred center. So we started to focus on communicating away from that. And then the priests came from the various churches, and they learned our ways and said that since our ways conflict with the Bible, that our ways are evil, that they come from Satan. They come from the devil. So in our weakened states, we slowly began to accept that. Now, another thing is that there were some Lakota people that didn't want to accept that. They wanted to hang on to the traditional Lakota star knowledge ways. And if they revolted, they were sent to a mental hospital in Canton, South Dakota, which was set up for all reluctant Indians in America that did not want to become Christianized. They were sent there. And these church priests also committed the medicine men, medicine women, holy men, holy women. They committed all of them to these mental asylums too. This way, the people would not go to them for help, that they would come to the churches. They wanted the Indian people to only go to the priests and not their traditional healers. So they sent the healers to this mental asylum to die. And if you are radical, you were sent there to die too. So while this is happening, the priests are saying to Indian people, if you believe our way, we will help your children. And so It was a very, very dire straits time. And so a lot of Indians became Christians because of that. Like I said, we were weak-minded too at that point. And those who stuck it out, there were people who refused to accept Christianity, but they went to church anyway. What they were doing was they were putting up a candy store front. On the outside, they were acting like good little Christian Indians, but on the inside they weren't. They were Star Knowledge people. They did this because they didn't want to get sent to that mental asylum to die. That's sad, isn't it? But that's part of what happened back then. And it's because of these people who maintained this knowledge in secret. Thanks to them, they passed it down to certain people, like me, and we still have this knowledge. And I'm sharing it with you. Because this regards the sacred center. And we all have that. This is not a Lakota thing. This is a Ikje Oyate thing. Ikje Oyate means human being. When you live this way, you communicate as a human, not as a Lakota, not as a German, or a Japanese, or an African. You communicate as a human. That's really important to know. So, that's how it was back then. Now remember I said that the priest said to the Indians, we will help your children. So, they took the children away from the parents, sent them to boarding school hundreds of miles away, where these children were tortured to speak only English and learn the civilized Christian way. If they spoke about home, they were tortured. These schools didn't do background checks in those days. The pay was really low. So they got really no good teachers in these schools. A lot of these teachers were sadistic. They got sexual pleasure from torturing people. And here, this is like summer holiday camp for them. And the same thing for perverts. A lot of perverts now had their pick of the litter. And they could get away with it. That's what happened. A lot of these children were murdered, they were killed, they were raped, they were molested. And there's a lot of unmarked graves near these schools. Not all these children are accounted for. So, those who made it through, what they learned was whatever they saw. Because a lot of these children never went back home. They were told by the priests that their families had died and that there was nobody there. And that broke their hearts. This is why some of these children, they were so sad they couldn't eat. And they ended up starving themselves to death. And those who made it through, like I said, they didn't really survive because they were not able to process all these emotional traumas that they experienced. They didn't know how, because the only adults that were around them were these unhealthy, abusive people, teachers, dorm matrons, cooks, janitors, priests. They were all unhealthy to them. That's all they knew. They learned how to become victims, and they learned how to become abusers to those who they considered weaker than themselves. So they didn't really survive. A lot of these children that made it through these schools, they had a lot of traumas that they didn't know how to deal with, because all they saw was abuse. That's what they learned. There was no adult, healthy role models to emulate. Remember I said these children were told that their families were all dead. So they didn't go back during summer holiday. They just stayed at these schools and worked. So when they left these schools, they tried to live in mainstream America. Nobody accepted them. They would say, you're a heathen. You're a dirty Indian. So they couldn't even get jobs off the reservation. And when they went back to the reservation, to their people, they ran into more problems. Many, many times they were not even accepted by their own people because their own people were saying, you're too white. You act like a white man. So they're caught in between. So a lot of them turned to alcohol to try to hide all of it, to try to forget everything. They turned to alcohol and then later drugs. There were some who tried to make it. They married each other because they knew each other went through the same thing. And they didn't want their children to go through what they went through. So they didn't teach them the language. They didn't teach them the culture. Those children, the children of these first generation boarding school people, those children are today's elders. When they were born, they didn't learn the language. They didn't learn Lakota Star knowledge. They never got the opportunity to. When you look at an old person on the reservation today, they're not the connection to the ancient past. No, they were born in a Christian background at a time when the reservations were strongly Christian. So this is what happened. That's a native experience that a lot of people don't realize. This is what happened all over America and Canada too. So the next generation, they are sent to boarding school too. No choice. It's a little bit better, but they're still abused. They're still getting treated really no good. And so they grow up, have children, and they don't teach their children anything. What can they teach them? They don't know anything concerning their own language. This is why today most people cannot speak their own language, and what little cultural information they know is Christianized, meaning it's dualistic, and it's not the original ancient form. Okay, so the first generation of Indian kids that were sent to boarding school, since all around them were unhealthy adults who did nothing but abuse them, they didn't receive healthy parenting. They missed things that they should have learned about life. So they're lacking emotional development. So when they grow up, and those who make it through these boarding schools and then they have children, those children are also lacking that emotional support, that emotional development, because the parents don't know how to do it. All they knew and all they learned was abuse. All they experienced in these schools was abuse. So they have a hard time trying to be a healthy parent. So they do the best that they can. But the children still are not receiving the proper emotional development, the experiences that healthy children should receive from healthy parents. They're still missing that. And so when that second generation grows up, they know even less concerning healthy parenting. And so their children receive even less. And every time this happens, the next generation becomes more dualistic than the previous one. So let me try to say that again. The first generation boarding school kids, they didn't receive proper parenting skills. So when they have children, Their children are not receiving healthy training that they should be receiving. They're receiving even less than their parents. Now, that second generation, when they grow up, see, they know even less. So when they have children, those children are receiving even less, and it gets worse with each generation, which also means that the less healthy emotional development they receive, the more dualistic they become. So with each generation is more becoming emotionally underdeveloped, they're also becoming more dualistic. So today, it's a huge mess on the reservation. As a whole, we're incredibly underdeveloped emotionally, and we are incredibly dualistic. We're quick to attack each other. We're quick to pull each other down. We're just like the rest of the civilized, dualistic world. Notice I didn't say white man, because this is all over the world. It's not just among white countries. It's all over the world. Wherever there is a dualistic ideology, where one gender is considered less than and property of the other gender, you're going to have incredibly underdeveloped emotional people, which equals incredibly dualistic people. And that is unhealthy. So that started by the time of the late 1800s on the reservation. So that's why today there's a big mess on the reservation. Well, you can extend that mess worldwide. It's all based on somebody being an oppressor and somebody being its victim. Sadly, they need each other to exist. Now, where it gets tricky is when you're a victim, you're not a survivor until you've dealt with that emotion. Like I said earlier, a lot of these kids that went to this boarding school, they didn't really survive. They lived through it, but they didn't survive because they were traumatized for the rest of their life, and that affected them in their own parenting, and that, as I said, that continues on today. So we're still feeling the effects. Now, this is just on the reservation, but imagine this happened worldwide in the Western industrialized society, because that's what feeds it, this addictive abuse. This is what feeds that society. So for that society to grow, it cannot develop emotionally. That's what's going to kill it, is emotional development. So that's why they don't want you to develop emotionally. This is why religions are created, to keep you drunk in an emotion by promising you an eternal home in a certain emotional state. It's a trick. But in Lakota Star knowledge, as I said earlier, emotions are part of a learning experience. They're not places to live. But religion wants you to live in it. Yeah, if you follow it, if it says do it, then you'll be eternally happy. And then it says if you don't do it, you're eternally damned. See, it keeps you in an emotion. It scares you, puts you in fear. This is not love. This is abuse. That's oppression. It's really tricky, but that's what it is. So, the whole world is messed up because of the same process that happened to everybody. So, this leads us to when we encounter experiences in which we're hurt, we're attacked, whether it's verbally or physically, emotionally, and in the case of religion, spiritually abused. It's really easy to want to retaliate and revenge. But when we do that, If we do that, if we choose that route, we're becoming drunk in the emotion too. So it's not going to work. Because answering abuse with abuse is not going to work. So this is unhealthy communication. And no communication, when you send it out, it comes back to you 4 times strong. So if it's healthy, it'll come back to bless you. If it's unhealthy, it'll come back to mess your life up even more than it already is. So this is where we have to be careful. When somebody sends us a very unhealthy communication, we have to get it out, because it is going to affect us. It doesn't matter if it comes from people we know or not. It's going to affect you. You're going to get hurt. You'll feel sad or maybe angry, scared. You don't know what to do. It's an energy that's going to be inside us until we get it out. We're not designed only to give communication. We're also designed to receive it. So people say stuff like that to us. If we're not emotionally healthy, it overwhelms us and we get real hurt. And we want to hurt. We want those people who sent it to hurt worse than we do. So we wish bad things to happen to those people. And that's unhealthy. Because, like I said, you're getting intoxicated into that. So it's a trap. The way to deal with that is to take some time to let it out. I mean, you have to. It has to come out. So these are feelings you're going to feel. Let them come out in the beginning. Yeah. When you think of those people that you want them dead or whatever, go ahead and think like that, because those thoughts have to come out. It doesn't mean you're going to act on it, okay? But it's like cleaning out the toilet bowl. Do you know what I mean? You need to flush it out, which means you have to get it out. You're cleaning it out. I'm not saying you're a toilet bowl, okay? That's a bad analogy. You're cleaning house, yeah? The dust on the floor is not just going to lift up and go away. You have to clean it out. So you use a vacuum cleaner, you use a broom or whatever, you clean it out. Yeah? So this is what you do to yourself. And part of that means going ahead and feeling like that for a little while, just a little while, because it has to come out. Yeah? It has to come out. You let that stuff come out. This is your heart working by itself. Okay? So you have to let those emotions, those thoughts come out. Go ahead and think them. Because when you do that, you're moving it out. So it's not going to bother you later. Yeah? So you're moving the stuff out. And then you slowly bring your mind into the picture. And you start thinking of the things that are important in your life. And prioritizing, and look around you, what's important, your family, your job, your friends. You look at all that, and then you start changing your communication now. And then, with the people that you love, do something together with them. Whether it's cooking or making something, making an artwork, or do something together, because you're exchanging. And when that person does that with you, they're giving you medicine. And you're nurturing them too. So you're starting to cleanse things like this. So your mind is now entering and is starting to guiding the flow of energy within you in your communication. You start it like that. Because see, this is all based on this natural law called Wawokia, yeah, that what you send out comes back stronger. One other thing too is do something physically vigorous, because the energy is in your mind. The energy, it's in your body. If you try to deny it and say, oh, I'm just going to forget it and think of something else, that's not going to work, because it's going to be in your body. Your body doesn't forget. So your body will let you know eventually. Yeah, you might have a nervous breakdown if you don't deal with it. So that's why you do something really physical. Yeah, go for a really fast run or sauna or something like that, because that's going to help in getting that energy out too. Yeah, so all these kind of things, you put them all together like that, that clears you out and it puts the energy where it needs to be. Yeah, and then you really should make yourself a medicine wheel to remind you of the four parts of the self, that you need to cleanse every part. And you can do this with people so that you nurture one another, and then the energy leaves you. That's how you get rid of it. So Lakota star knowledge concept.